Welcome. Welcome to our Hangout series, Innovation by Design. It is designed for innovation, design thinking, and IoT design leaders to share what's working for them, as well as the tips that can make others more successful. Today, for our Hangout topic, it is the next generation of IoT, designing with data in mind. And this topic is something that many of you had asked for, so hopefully you will learn a lot over the next hour with our innovation and IoT design experts from AARP, UnitedHealth Group, and Accenture. We'll explore how to design today with the data in mind as the IoT world explodes. So to hear what's really important, let me first start off and introduce the panelists. First, we have Theo Lau, who is Director of Market Innovation at AARP. Hi, Theo. Good to have you.
Good morning. Happy to be here. Thanks for including me.
She's an innovator, technologist, and connector whose work seeks to spark innovation to improve consumer financial well-being and health. She focuses on developing and growing an ecosystem of corporates, entrepreneurs, and VCs to better address the unmet needs of consumers. And most recently, she was named LinkedIn's top voice for finance and economy in 2017. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
And Shane's a repeat panelist. We're happy to have you back, Shane. So
thank you, Gretchen.
Shane Picciotto is a detective and engineer at heart. He works as senior product strategy consultant in human-centered design at Fusion, which is part of the UnitedHealth Group, a Fortune 6 company. Fusion believes in putting the customer first by leveraging design thinking methodologies to drive businesses, experience, and development strategies as an internal innovation and consulting team. Welcome, Shane.
Thank you.
And Paul Barsamian, who's Principal Director in Accenture's Innovation and Thought Leadership Team. Paul has 15 years of design, development, and commercial operations experience in unmanned systems. Very cool. Paul heads up Accenture's global UAV, or Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Services, and serves as Accenture's North America Digital Security Lead. He holds patents in both security and UAV drone technologies as a thought leader in robotics and unmanned systems and commercial applications. Hey, Paul, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
And I am Gretchen Hoffman, VP of Marketing at Altitude. My role today is as the moderator. So let's just first align Altitude with Accenture, since Paul and I are in the same company here. Altitude is a design and innovation consulting firm based in Boston. It was acquired by Accenture's Product Innovation Group last year. So clients include Under Armour, Nike, Thermo Scientific, to name a few. And I do see Theo has left the screen, so I'm sure she'll be coming back. Theo, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, there you are. You're back. Great. Okay, so let's now get into the panel dialogue for what I know everyone is here more waiting for. And I think a good way to kick this off, frankly, is to hear a little bit from each of the panelists. So Shane, we'll start with you. And if you could start off with really taking a look at how big data has transformed with the next generation of product design, and giving some examples that you know of.
Sure thing. So the way that I see the product design has changed is it's shifted the team that normally does product design, and it's made them incorporate new people. So as an example, we have, as part of UnitedHealth Group, population health management, where we're working with Medicare and Medicaid patients to make sure that they have the best experience possible. If you look at Medicare diabetic patients, once they get admitted to the hospital, there's about a 14% chance that they'll get readmitted to the hospital. We have our product design group that's looking at how we can help Medicare patients, and they're using big data to look at the number of medications that patients are using to treat the same ailment, and they're also looking at the complexity of the medication regime that the patient is under. Now, the Medicare group isn't able to do that design on their own, so they have to bring in big data scientists in order to help them understand what are all the different factors that help influence whether a patient will get readmitted to the hospital, and then how can we help reduce those admission rates. So that's one way that I've seen big data influence the product design in today's products.
Great example. Theo, how about you?
So for me, I love consumer products. And so, I like, for example, some of the wonderful things that the smart thermostats are doing. Nest is a very intriguing one. They have a learning thermostat that understands or try to understand your behavior and your habits. So, for example, if you like to turn up the heat in the morning, for those of us who live in the Northeast, it's pretty cold right now, and then and you like to turn it down before you go to bed. Over time, Nest can take notes and starts to build an automated schedule for you. So, and then also the other thing I really like about them is when you're going from home, it can set itself to an eco-friendly temperature to conserve energy, and because it can detect your location. And so those things are fascinating. It makes consumers' lives easier.
Excellent. Hey, Sean, there is one question here that related to what you said. So I was just thinking maybe we jump in. It's in the chat. It says, does your team use claims data to reduce and look for ways to reduce those readmissions? Are you able to address that?
Absolutely. So when we look at all the different information we have around whether a Medicare patient is going to be readmitted, we have their primary care information, we have all their vitals, we have what the hospital discharge is, we have the claims information as well. And so it's definitely taken into account, but oftentimes the claims is one piece of the diagnosis, but it doesn't tell the whole picture. However, we definitely do use it in that factor.
Excellent. Thank you. And for folks listening in, it's helpful if you can put the questions in the Ask a Question, but if you feel it's very pertinent to what's being talked about right now, I'll try to see if I can multitask and jump back and forth. Okay, so after all, this is a hangout. We're just having a dialogue. So Paul, could I ask you to talk about your example?
Sure. And I think it's hard to talk about big data without context setting it and thinking about the broader story around how this has transformed IT. And it's been a bit of a domino effect. So, I've been at this game a long time. I've seen a transition in what they're now calling IoT. Before that, they had a bunch of other names for it. But we've gone from bytes and text as data to images and video. It's the perfect example, right? This has forever changed the IoT game, and we've gone from burping floating point numbers that are temperature readings in these little devices to high resolution, massive image maps of physical locations, and they're at polar opposite ends of the spectrum. This in turn, and that data is massive in size. This in turn has really pushed the boundaries for the V's of data. When we talk about the V's of data, I usually like to say it's volume, variety, velocity, and value. And for the volume and variety point, we're not giving up those temperature burps. We're not giving up all that data we've been gathering for years, but now we're adding to it. And so we have this broader set of things that we need to do around correlating this data to make use of it. And that data means that we can get richer and more timely insights. And I'm going to be a bit of a curmudgeon throughout this, just to kind of play devil's advocate. Insight's the name of the game. I don't give a damn about data at the end of the day. Insight is really where this is at. And so if we can get richer insight out of lots of different types of data, that's the end game. Continuing that sort of domino effect, we no longer can build products that just show a table of numbers that takes 10 minutes to load. I'm making a referral here to a company that we're partners with that does that kind of thing, right? But there's big enterprise systems that have done that for years. That's not the game anymore. You can't do that. Now you have to have beautiful and interactive and intuitive and fast, and most of all, insightful interfaces for users to interact with. And the last point that I'll throw in there as kind of a zinger is big data has transformed IT, at least from my perspective, because as a security curmudgeon, it's a pain in my backside, right? It's created a whole new set of headaches. And as a result, it's created a bunch of opportunities.
I'll jump on, Paul, what you said about it's not just the data, but the insights. I know that we have data in many different forms, whether it's vitals, whether it's information on addresses, how often someone goes, where they go. And data in and of itself isn't helpful to us, but it's that insight piece, which we've been spending a lot of time on. Yep. And I think only recently realized we need to shift our focus from just gathering the data to making insights out of it.
Yeah,
absolutely agree.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was at, I went to Autodesk Build Space, in Boston. And it was interesting hearing all they were doing with all their data, basically, in terms of looking at what people were using, which machines people were using, how they were using it, etc. and they were going to use that data to help figure out what they build on their top floors. So they hadn't even finished it, and they were waiting to figure out, based on all the feedback and user data, what they'd actually do on the top 2 floors. So, definitely very, very valuable. And I totally agree with you. It's the insights, not just big data, right?
Yep.
So, all right, let's go on to the next one. Theo, I'd love to pull you in here. Can you share how designing with data in mind changes how designers approach the product or service design that they're working on? And how do you see this evolving in the future?
So, yeah, I think, so far we see a lot of solutions out in the marketplace that address a specific functional need, right? Everything is a component that serves a specific pain point. And I think, going towards the future, since we have so much better computing power and, like you say, data where you can gather insights, we should evolve to more of an ecosystem or a platform, if you will. Oliver Wyman had a really good report that came out recently that talked about that in the banking space. And it's the exact same thing, rather than creating functional products to address a specific need, I think the future will be combining all of those functional products with other members of the ecosystem so you can provide a more holistic experience for the consumer. So, we go back to consumer space. Rather than having a smart fridge that you can look into and see what groceries you have, and then, you have a connected oven that does certain things, why can't we piece all of them together? Why can't we, use the insights and get a better understanding of the consumer's purchase habits, perhaps even reorder things for them, anticipate what they need? I think that will be the future.
Yeah. Shane, anything you want to add to that?
As I was thinking about the way of the future, there are 2 pieces of how it actually affects products that are being designed. And earlier on in the design process, I really think it's what we've seen before, the analytics and other times something new technology comes into play. How do you begin with that in mind? So when you're wireframing, how do you think about the data sets and tables that are going to come out of it? And so how do you get that data, but then how do you give the feedback to someone to show, here are the results that we've been able to do and actually make use of it? The way I've actually seen that come into play is there's a company that we work with called MindStrong, and they use the interactions that you have with your phone, how frequently you tap on the screen, where you tap, and they're able to predict whether or not you're going to have a mental health concern come up. And so they're able to do that just by the interactions that you have and looking at the way that everyone interacts with their phone, and then give you the feedback and say it may be helpful for you to reach out to your provider, or, hey, here's a nurse that you can speak to if you'd like. And so because they were able to begin with that in mind, they were able to give the feedback and then make it actionable for the end user or the patient in our case.
Okay. Well, it's interesting, we keep talking about big data and we're saying how important the insights from the big data is. So Paul, I'd love to hear, how is data, or maybe the insights that we capture, how does it influence large company strategies and the direction that's set? Maybe give some examples also to make this real.
Sure. And first, I'll sort of beat the mantra drum again here. I think that data influences losing strategies, and I think insight influences winning ones. There's a difference. There's a real bona fide difference, and I've seen it firsthand with my clients. But that said, you can't ignore the data. You have to be responsible with it, and it's not valuable until you lose it, frankly, or compromise it. And over the last 20 some odd years now in this business, I've seen the industry transform and spin up whole divisions and corporate functions, and there's even whole industries that have spun up around serving these data management and data protection needs. And so when you talk about how is it influencing strategy, it doesn't get any bigger than security in my mind. We've got companies now that have millions of B2C customer records sitting in a cloud database, and it's just out there. And technologies like cloud computing have made it really easy for people to do stupid things with data. You want examples? Anybody remember Equifax? Yahoo, Target, Home Depot, JP Morgan, Sony going back a few years? I mean, I'm at the point now as a security curmudgeon where I'm using Equifax, not to poke at them, but I'm using them like a verb. Don't get Equifaxed, right? You really have to watch what you're doing with all of this data. So keep in mind that yes, the data is a building block and it's not the end game, but you have to be really responsible with it. And that has a major influence on your strategy.
I really liked where Paul was going, because when you were mentioning the strategy, it wasn't about a specific product strategy, but more at the enterprise level. I know for us, we've seen, and you were talking about building specific competencies and capabilities within the org. For us, it's been really focused on how do we make engineers that want to continue that deep individual work as opposed to moving up to the manager. What's that career track look for them? And so we brought in someone to help us create a distinguished engineer track so that someone's able to progress in their career and stay focused on machine learning, natural language processing, any of the topics that are currently ones that we need to invest in. And it's something that shockingly we haven't had. And so now we're giving engineers those chance to distinguish themselves and move up in the ranks without going along that management track.
I agree. There's an immense value in having that brain share and knowledge share in a model where you're not forcing them out because they're not trying to move into upper management, right? And working for a big consulting company, that was a problem we had years ago. And we had to make that shift because we're in a talent game. You can't push those people out and expect to continue to succeed.
Yeah, it's interesting as we're talking about all this. I still love your comment about data influences the losing strategies and insights influences the winning ones, Paul. I hadn't actually thought of it that way. And, I think that's a great thing for all of us to remember.
I'm still stuck with the don't get Equifaxed. Paul, I think I'm going to borrow that from you.
I'm highly confident I'm going to get in trouble for saying that. So.
I won't.
I'll have to bleep it in the record, huh?
Yeah.
So, all right. So, I think another part that is important to think about is, we're talking about the products and what's really being delivered, but let's talk about the quality. So how is IoT and the data that's collected impacting the quality of the products and the consumer experience? And can you give some examples? And Paul, maybe you can jump in here.
Sure. And I kind of spoiled this above.
Yeah.
In the previous question.
I'm just kidding.
Spoiler alert. I think what's happening now is that the size and speed of this data is really enabling a richer set of insights, and it's making cases harder to understand and contextualize and personalize and navigate when you go into this use case design concept as you're building out a product. But that insight being harder to understand also opens up new opportunities because you can build and spin up whole differentiators in your product around a clean and fast data visualization capability. And I'll give you an example. One of the patents that, you mentioned I have a few patents. One of the patents I got about 2 years ago now, and we're still on the journey of continuing to improve this as a product. We developed a precision agriculture service that really combines a lot of different types of data for farmers. Now, a lot of people have farming families or family members that may be in farming, but farmers, each and every one of them is like a little CIO. Some little CIOs, some big CIOs. Some of these guys and gals operate really big businesses. But farmers are swimming in data, right? It's unbelievable because you don't think of them as IT people, as technology people, but they have unbelievable technology out in these fields. And I've seen it firsthand. I've got the dirty boots to prove it. They're swimming in all this data around telematics from tractors and weather data that's localized to individual fields and soil samples and rain content and how many growth degree days they're getting because of the sun that year. And I mean, there's a million different ways that they get data, but the problem is they have data. They haven't had insights. And the thing that we figured out and the thing that we went and built, which was innovative and different, was contextualizing that data to them. We built an interface that they navigate using something natural for them. It's an iPad app, and they look at a map of all their fields, and they can point and click into individual things that are going on in their field. And it's not things that are going on, right? It's not, I have 15 degrees, warmer temperatures today in field 1. It's, hey, the weather's impacting the growth rate at which your crop is moving, right? Based on all the other things that have been happening. And by the way, your commodity data for this, let's say it's corn, right? The commodity markets are moving in a downward direction and you've got a problem going on in this field that your crop consultant just came out and told you about. Do you really want to spend money to fix that problem, given it's not really going to benefit you in any way financially at the end of the year? And this was a revelation for people, right? Farmers are always having to do this stuff in little notepads and trying to mentally make these decisions based on the way Grandpappy did it for 3 generations going back. And being able to contextualize that data and even do things like adding an AR, right, augmented reality within the app, to be able to have them scan the field with the iPad and walk over to the thing that the sensors have shown them. It was a really revolutionary way for them to start managing what they're doing in their operation. And the bottom line is they're getting insight and recommendations. They're not just getting, I have higher temperatures in my field today. So it's an example I'm passionate about, because we've got some pretty big problems to solve with population and food supply and land that we can farm on. I think this kind of thing is going to make a dent in it. So yeah, it's impacting a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, and it's going to impact everybody eventually when we start talking about managing limited resources on the globe.
Paul, did you see the National Geographic article a couple months ago? It was talking about the Netherlands and how they have greenhouses equal to the size of roughly Manhattan, and the amount of data that they have, they're swimming in it as well, but the yields that they're getting are 3 times what you would get out in the field, because they're able to be so precise with the watering, with the fertilizer, with everything. So just like, that's what it spurred.
Yeah, and it's changing too. You say you say National Geographic, and I think you said Manhattan. Mm-hmm. In New Jersey, there's a bunch of warehouses that are starting to convert to do hydroponic farming for vegetables. And we think of hydroponics, and we have the jokes about the West Coast and pot and all that kind of stuff. Forget that, right? The real science is in figuring out how to grow crops effectively and efficiently with reduced amounts of input and increased amounts of output. At the end of the day, that's what every business is about, right? And it's exactly the type of thing that I'm talking about. Data in and of itself is great, and you have to have it to do something, but you can't just use the data. You have to correlate all that data in these complex environments to be able to get those output increases.
Yeah, exciting time, I have to say.
Yeah,
more data, more
it's
insight.
Fun stuff.
We're able to nail more successes, which is great. So let's get a little more specific here. Theo, would love to hear a little bit, with smart appliances becoming more popular, talked about more with consumers, what will be the biggest challenges the industry will face that big data may or may not be able to help solve?
Yeah, so, if we think about smart appliances or smart home, right, if you will, you think about the things that we have in our house. I am actually surprised that none of you guys have brought up the big elephant in the room, the Amazon and the Google Home, right? The assistant, it's getting more and more popular, especially, with the last 2 years. And I don't know if, people are aware, it's actually a form of communication device, if you will, that the older adults are fascinated with, and they're actually open to using it. It's Alexa's always patient, right? You can keep asking Alexa, how's the weather today? And she would just cheerfully answer you 20 times a day, nonstop. And so I think, but with that being said, though, if I look at my house, I have a Google Home, I have Alexa, I am waiting to get my hands on the Apple HomePod, and I have Ring, I have all kinds of devices. They are a pain in the rear to get everything set up. They are, we are at the point where, yeah, sure, you have all these great consumer devices, but in my mind, I don't think they are easy enough to use. Setting up is definitely difficult. I even have the Amber, the IoT coffee mug, and it links and unlinks itself, so I think to be successful, right, use of design is very important, and that's something we need to think about. Or even, something we talk about with all the virtual assistants, being able to understand what you're saying, right? I have a little bit of an accent, but even that Google Home doesn't like me. 7 out of 10 times I have to keep repeating myself. So I would like to hope that one of these days, with the insights, you guys talk about insights, right? It gather, how many times do I have to keep repeating myself, right? What kind of questions do I ask? How do I actually use the product? They will be able to use that and create a better user experience. And, that's something hopefully big data can solve, but also it goes beyond that.
Theo, when you mention Alexa and Google Home, I'm reminded of the great browser wars of the 90s. And if any of you are old enough to remember that, I see the same pattern shaking out. Before that, it was Betamax versus VHS.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
All of you millennials on the phone need to go Google that, because I don't.
Yeah, I knew what you were talking about, too.
I know what you're talking about.
You need to understand that reference. But I have a client right now, Theo, that's in the middle of that, and what they're trying to do is really bring a lot of those technologies together to make it simpler for Google Betamax. I'm sorry, I caught the comment in the chat there, and it made me giggle. I've got a client. Actually, I've seen my client and some of their competition. I was just at CES a couple weeks ago. There's a lot of talk about how they're going to start consolidating these things. And right now, everybody's still in the mode of they have to pick a winner, right? So, if you pick Betamax, you lose. If you pick VHS, you win. We're trying to figure out which one's which. But there's a lot of startups, there's a lot of businesses that are transitioning into this idea of connecting all this stuff together to get that insight, to get that correlation, right? How do I know that my Ring doorbell saw a UPS guy that's been to the same house with the same type of package for the last 6 weeks and is bringing in groceries, should be able to go into the house and then be detected in the house, versus somebody who's knocking on the door to sell me Girl Scout cookies or sell me a bridge down in the south side of Chicago, right? How do we differentiate those things? And how does the technology start to learn my personal behaviors in my home? Because Theo, your home and my home sound similar from a technology perspective, but we have very different dynamics, right? Our families are going to be different. The way that we interact with our technology is going to be different. And the technology has to personalize itself to be effective for these people. And I think that it sounds like that's one of the things you were kind of poking at.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like we know a few startups that, have started to look at using the virtual assistants and to be able to create more holistic solutions for seniors, right? Be it as a way for them to reach out to their loved ones, caregivers, or be it as a medication adherence reminder, all of those things. I think there is really good use that, we can leverage the technology for, but it needs to be user-friendly and it needs to be personalized, like you say. What my daughter asked Google Home to do, got to be different than what I asked Google Home to do. So.
That's right.
I think we're getting in a little bit towards talking verticals, but would love to have any specific thoughts, maybe Shane, jump in here, where you believe a specific vertical will leverage the data captured today, like more than others, right? I mean, for example, there's, you're in the healthcare industry, there's already some comments here in the chat about healthcare, maybe comment there or other industries you may think of.
Absolutely. As I've been thinking about it, goes back to, Paul, your point around the data. Data is bad. You need the insights. I forget exactly what we said. For us, we've really found that there's, at least within the healthcare verticals, so if you think about Medicaid, Medicare, your employer insurance, some of those verticals have the data and some don't. And the ones that already have the data are the ones where we see they're starting to leverage it more. So for our case, that's looking at the population health management, which goes across all of healthcare. But there they already have the data for all the different types of patients, and they're able to look at opioid use has been a big focus for the company over the last couple of years. We're able to look at who has a chronic back pain, who's had painful procedures done, what makes them more likely to be an opioid user and put them at risk. And so for us, it's the vertical of where is the data residing the most? And for healthcare, that goes across all of them, although we also see it in the Medicare space as well, simply because people have more conditions and there's more data around those conditions as well. But I'm sure Paul and Theo have seen other examples from different verticals as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I work for a big evil consulting company, and I say that with all the love in my heart. But my initial answer is, is it specific verticals? It's very simply nope. It's not. I'm seeing this same sort of uptake with wildly varying use cases across energy and natural resources, retail, services, transport, health and pharma. To your point. Financial services, media and entertainment, software, high tech. I mean, I could go on and on, right? I've got clients in every one of these areas, every one of these verticals, that is adopting big data for a completely different set of reasons. And then once they adopt big data, they're trying to figure out what to do with it, which is why I'm such a curmudgeon about data versus insight. It's a key Lego brick in the architecture, right? If you're an architecture junkie like me, if you don't see Hadoop or a big data blob somewhere in that architecture picture, you start to get twitchy. But doing something with that is much more important. So focusing on the use cases and working backwards, that's where I'm really pushing my clients hard to say, let's talk about the insight and the end game, not how you're going to get there, if that makes sense.
I agree. And what I like is, in addition to build on what you just said, Paul, is there is also another aspect to it. If you are able to glean data from one aspect and merge it with the other, for example, the convergence of health and wealth, that can provide you with really amazing insights. Let's say someone that we think, based on the data that we see, could be, suffering from early Alzheimer's. That data, if it's being fed back to the financial advisor or the financial institution, could help prevent them from potential, fraud scenario down the road. So we don't have to wait until that person actually become a victim of financial abuse before that happens. So, there are a lot of different use cases, that are very interesting to look further.
Yeah, just as a comment in the chat, thank you all you millennials who have helped their parents in their technology.
Yes.
And we do acknowledge that there's digital natives.
Agreed.
There's digital native wannabes. or not want to be and want to have kids help us, right? So thank you, all of you. It's all one big community here. So let's again remind folks, please do submit your questions in the Ask a Question. Also, we welcome engaging with you on Twitter at altitude_inc. And also, I do want to encourage you to look at our website, Altitude Inc. The reason I am suggesting that is, we're talking a lot about different topics, but if you go to our work area, our case studies are on there, and we have some about Firefly, and you'll see some additional ones, Built Little Sparrow's Billy Hut. They are good stories about how we really are engaging, one with IoT and helping in healthcare and the elderly, which I've seen in some of the chat comments. So I just want to encourage you folks there. And then away from the commercial, back to the star here of drones, Paul. I loved hearing everything you were talking about before the hangout on drones. So can you talk a little bit about new technologies like drones and AI, artificial intelligence, and AR, augmented reality, and share how designing with these in mind is impacting smart technologies and the data that we're capturing?
Sure, and I'm going to hold this up here and say,
the drone junkie.
I am always packing heat, man. I've always got a drone everywhere I go. And we talk about these emerging and newly emerged technologies like drones. These are technologies that people are starting to take with them everywhere, literally, and they're totally transformative because not only do they give you the ability to interact with your environment in new and different ways, but they're portable, they're automated, they assist you. When we were chatting before we started the session here, I was talking about how automation and human use of drones has really sort of merged over the last few years. Drones are making it easier for people to do things in a semi-automated fashion, and the intelligence built into these devices is starting to anticipate what you're trying to do. But all of this comes at a cost when you're talking about doing this stuff for enterprise. Drones for fun is great, right? Like this to me is a toy, right? We deal with big industrial drones when we're talking to energy clients or agriculture clients that have to manage hundreds and thousands of acres of land or a couple million miles worth of linear assets. So when you start to scale drones, when you start to see the scale behind this technology, that scale needs management. When I first started in IT, laptops were really just starting to kick in and become prevalent. So I'm dating myself. You can't see all of my gray hair here, but people had laptops, and there was kind of this game where, I might have some technology. I'm going to bring it to work and try to use it. As we started to hand laptops out to people, as we started to give people compute to use, we realized that you can't hand out 1,000 laptops to a bunch of people in your organization and say, good luck, right? It doesn't work. I've tried it. you have to manage the hardware, you have to manage the software, you have to manage the usage of these devices, and that's going to apply to drones as well. So as we scale this out, we have to take all the lessons we learned over the last 30 years in IT and apply that to these net new technologies to make sure we can actually manage them to do something useful. And we've learned technology, as automated as you can make it, doesn't keep itself alive, right? How's that server sitting in the cloud working out for you? Do you have to maintain it or not? I mean, you do, right? This stuff takes maintenance. And so building that infrastructure and building the background for that, building the capabilities for that in your organization are new strategic things that have to come up. The second thing you have to do is, we talked about the V's of data, right? We talked about variety, velocity, value, volume. That data has to get managed, because these devices don't always just burp that temperature data to a network point somewhere and it magically goes into a big data pot. I've done mission days where I've gone out and flown missions for 8 or 9 clients and come back with 40,000 image files that are sitting on one memory card. And then I have to go sort out where all those images go. They go to a cloud processing service to be orthomosaic, which is a fancy way of saying, tiling all the images together. They have to go to different services. They have to go to different enterprises. Some of this data is sensitive, so it has to be protected. You have to be able to automate the management and movement of that data. And so digital data distribution and digital insight distribution become really, really important as a capability. You have to have a plan for moving that data around. And then third, you have to have a really strong platform for aggregating that data above just that big data store into some sort of insight. Right. My clients in resources and my clients in healthcare, giving a nod to Shane here, the data that you guys use is vastly different, even though it contains a lot of the same elements. And how you analyze that data, what you do with it, can change month to month and year over year. That pace is accelerated. And so you need a really strong platform for running analytics on that data and correlating against lots of different data sources that are both within and out of your organization. The good news is that things like AI, artificial intelligence, which is a widely misused term, but that broader concept of artificial intelligence and edge analytics. If anybody is curious about edge, there's a lot of great material out on Google for it. But edge processing and edge analytics is about making the end devices smarter, making them able to understand what they're seeing, understand what data they're gathering a little bit better. Those are putting a good dent in that data distribution and that end analytics game by pushing that intelligence to the edge, right? So the devices are now able to interact with the environment and start to anticipate, Theo, to the point you made earlier, right? It'd be great if Google Home or Amazon could anticipate what I want and need based on a set of things that it's learned about me, right? Drones and some of these technologies that are autonomous are doing the same thing. They're anticipating that need and figuring out that, hey, I'm flying 500 miles of pipeline. I don't need to gather 12 and a half hours worth of 4K data that I'm going to pump over a network and weigh everybody down with. I'm going to look for a problem. I'm going to identify that problem and just send you information about that. That was a long diatribe. Sorry.
That was great. I love hearing you talk. I love the energy, the passion you have behind all this. And someday I'm going to watch you fly a drone, see if you can do it better than my digital kid. But anyway, so I want to get in and just switch the conversation a little bit and talk skill sets. Okay, I see Monica in the chat has made a couple comments. One says home healthcare agencies need to hire IoT specialists to set up smart homes to respond to the need. There's some other comments that have been made. So let's jump into that. And Shane, maybe I'll have you jump in since, again, here we are, more conversation on healthcare too. But with the growth of IoT, what capabilities and skill sets do you see companies needing to grow in their organizations, or where do they get them?
I think what Paul was talking about earlier with building the infrastructure is one of the places that we've seen the biggest areas of need develop. So we have architects within each line of business, Medicare, Medicaid, but we don't have that enterprise view. And that's what we're really struggling with, because everyone's developing it on their own and no one's incentivized to do it in the first place. So because, let's say, Medicare doesn't want to go and create this platform for big data to be used on, they're going to go do it very specific for themselves, so it can't be used by others across the company. So that's one area that we're seeing, these enterprise architects, if you will. Yeah. The other place is We have a group called Data Science University. It's really externally facing, working with academic institutions for what can we do with the data that we have that's not immediately applicable for us. An example of that is we were looking at renal failure, which is kidney failure in patients, and you can do two different things if that's in your future. One is get dialysis, and the other one is get a kidney transplant. And using DSU used big data to help them understand when you should go on that kidney transplant list versus when you should just go ahead and have dialysis. So that enterprise architect skill set is needed, and then something that's, for us at least, externally facing, which isn't used immediately by the business, but can be a little bit more on the cutting edge, but a little bit back from the bleeding edge.
So when we're talking about data and enterprise, right, Shane, you mentioned, and that was fascinating. You talk about data science. I think that's, from a consumer product perspective, that's also very important. So some of the products I'm fascinated with is, for example, there's a company in Chicago that makes a lights that you can put underneath the mattress, and it can sense when the older adult is getting out of bed, and it will illuminate. But the thing is, it's not just a night light, if you will, right? What it does is also gets the data on how often does the person get out of bed, how long is that person out of bed. So it will get all of those data and to be able to send it over to the caregiver and say, hey, we noticed there's a pattern. Maybe there's something you need to look into. It's sort of like a early warning, if you will, before you actually see a symptom. To enable all of those feature sets, you need data scientists. You need someone that can understand, come through the data, and to be able to get insights out from it. And then on top of it, you also need, I would say, behavioral scientists, right? That can understand what a consumer likes, what things they can do to nudge them towards healthier and better behavior. So those go hand in hand as well.
I'm going to pile on. I couldn't agree with Shane and Theo more. Although I'm going to propose that we rename data scientists to insight scientists. I'm absolutely beating the drum today. Right? But if you think about what a data, and we hire data scientists in droves that we can't get enough, right? They're that talent pool. When you talk about a place to be, understanding how to turn data into something useful is an unbelievably important skill. And I think it's going to continue to escalate in importance, even as we move past just the IT revolution, right? If you think forward to the biomedical revolution and genetics and all the things that are coming, right? All the really big revolutions in humanity that are coming, understanding how to look at information and turn it into something useful at the core is really what I think differentiates people from a talent perspective.
Yep, I agree. Paul, I'm surprised you didn't mention anything about cybersecurity analysts. That would be most important.
I'm wearing my drone hat, not my cyber curmudgeon.
Okay.
So just a comment along those lines, do you think companies are trying to train internal employees, like you mentioned hiring, insight scientists or data, scientists or whatever we want to call them right now. But, are they looking mostly outside? Are they trying to train people internally? Where are they getting all these people, particularly if there's a shortage?
I mean, speaking on behalf of Big Evil Corp, I don't know if anybody here watches one of my favorite shows of all time, but
I do.
We'll see if anybody gets the reference in the chat
I know
window.
what you're talking about.
No, we're doing both, right? And Theo, to your point, data science is becoming a really important part of cybersecurity because there is a lot of research and development being done in behavioral analysis to understand what is happening, what is normal behavior, what's not normal behavior. That's a critical part of cybersecurity. But to answer the question directly, Gretchen, we're doing both because we have to, right? Data science is a hard thing to learn, and we have people that are learning it alongside traditionally trained data scientists and becoming hybrid architect data science people, right, that we can use with clients to help them figure out and make the connection between what is just gathering data and where am I gathering that data from and what am I doing that data gathering activity for. So, I think that there's a spectrum of people and a spectrum of skills that not only have to be trained, but have to get experience in the workplace building these things, right? The only way to learn is to learn by fire, trial by fire, get your feet wet or get your feet dirty. It's going to have to be a combination of both. So I think it's on us to help continue to train people and give people opportunities to learn, but also continue to push the next generation of people coming through school to learn these things in the schooling that they're getting.
To echo Paul, we're trying to do both. I think it's easier for us to train. Simply finding the talent is we could do it with enough time, but it's easier to train people. That's where I've seen us investing more of our time and energy, at least.
That's interesting.
It's expensive.
It's a little bit different mindset too, right? So, all right. So for the folks listening in, we have about 15 more minutes. Please do put your questions or vote on the questions you want to make sure we get to in the Ask the Questions. We're going to do a couple more questions here with the panel dialogue, and then we're going to get to yours. Okay. So let's do a quick conversation on ROI. Everybody always wants to know ROI. Like, how do you know you're investing in the right things? So Shane, maybe you can chat a little bit about how's data used to help measure success or ROI of new products or services, or isn't it?
So for us, it very much is. We are a finance-driven organization. And as we try to shift it to the return on human and ROH and away from an ROI, but inevitably it comes back to ROI for us. We're not able to make the justification for big data and saying it's going to reduce. We can't make a blanket statement that's going to reduce or it's going to increase revenue or decrease cost by this amount. But we are able, if the business understands where their biggest cost drivers are, we're often able to link to how big data is going to help them with that. So for example, OptumRx, we have a lot of cost. Pharmacy benefit management is the business, and the margins are very low. It's similar to the grocery business. Prior authorization is what you need to get when you have an expensive medication that needs to be prescribed. And oftentimes there's a lot of hurdles that you have to go through. Your physician, primary care, might have to do stepwise treatment before you can even get the prior auth. So for us, being able to see, okay, big data can help us predict when a prior auth will get declined or accepted, can help us work with the patient or the doctor and then decrease costs. But we can't just blanketly say that it's going to reduce our costs. That's what we've seen so far.
Okay, makes sense. So just to make sure we get to everyone's questions that they've submitted here, so I see quite a few coming in. What I'd like to do is do a wrap of this part of the Hangout by having each of our panelists share just their top 2 takeaways that they want to make sure everybody remembers. Again, we want you to remember everything, but just the top ones of anything that's been said today that you think is most significant. So Thea, why don't I have you start?
Sure. So I think the first one, and Paul, I will steal it from you, insights is, data is important. Clean data is also important, but at the end of the day, data is only useful if you can get insights out from it. So that's my first takeaway. The second takeaway is thing, that I'm very passionate about is usability, right? Ease of use is important. Let's not get hung up on creating a solution or product just for the sake of it, right? It's only useful if users can actually use it and do something with it.
Excellent. Shane, how about you?
I'm going to jump on the insight bandwagon, but with a different perspective. And if I think about insights, it's making the data actionable. So have that bias towards action, because you can sit with the data and analyze it, act with it, take some action on it. And the quicker you do that and the smaller you make that action instead of making it big, helps you in so many ways. It decreases your bias towards getting attached to something because you've only worked with it for a small amount of time. And so that bias towards action, that's what changes the data into insights for myself. And the second one is that we've all spoken about, at least for myself, I've learned a tremendous amount. And I think the takeaway for me is follow up on what you've heard so far, whether it's hearing about turning data into insights, Paul, you were talking about agriculture, maybe there's something there. Just take something from here, and the takeaway is to continue and learn more about it.
Excellent.
I couldn't agree more, guys. And I'm so proud and happy that the insight bandwagon is moving. I'm gonna throw a couple things out there and maybe give you a buy 2 get 1 free. But the first thing I'll say is I'll echo the insight comments. Right, I can't beat that drum loud enough, because I think focusing on technology for technology's sake, to Theo's point, is a losing game, and we've seen it happen. I'm going to remind everybody, putting my security curmudgeon hat back on here, data is useless unless you lose it. So be responsible with what you're gathering, right? We talked about data and data for the sake of data bad. Losing data, once you have it, compromising it is really bad. And this has a massive negative impact on, clients that I've gone to help clean up these problems for. And it's something that we in Accenture deal with every day. I mean, we have a really big group of people that are focused on just protecting our data, our clients' data. You have to be responsible with the data that you gather, and you have to understand the context of why that data requires that responsibility. I think the second thing I'm going to throw out there is I'm going to just get off the Insight bandwagon and put my drone hat back on here for a minute. Make an investment. Go buy a drone. Really, okay. I'm going to get accused of being a crack dealer again here, because when DJI unveiled their new drone yesterday, I was all over the map. I mean, I'm talking to everybody and their uncle going, should I buy it? Should I buy it? And I'm like, yes, buy it. Buy it. Life is short. Make a personal investment, right? Go buy these technologies. Go get your hands dirty. In the farming journey that I've been on, which has been an unbelievable thing. I never thought I would be in a cattle feedlot with 40,000 head of cattle, right? That was one of my experiences. And I'm now having a conversation about pig farming in China. I never expected that as an engineer that was going to school to design chips. Go make an investment in technology, learn something, see where that journey takes you, get your fingers dirty, get your boots dirty, get in the middle of it. There's not enough of that in the corporate and enterprise world today. And I think there's a huge amount of value, if you're going to invest in yourself and your career and in your team's careers, in getting people into the thick of it. Encourage that playtime, encourage that experimentation, because that's how innovation happens. People find something and they see it and they get passionate about it, and it changes their life, and it changes the organization's direction in many cases. So I'm encouraging you, go buy a drone, go buy a piece of technology, experiment with it, do something interesting.
Yeah. No, great points, and show your parents too, all you millennials out there. But anyway, all right. Hey guys, yeah. I want to make sure we get to some of the questions here. So I do want to very much first thank our panelists, Theo from AARP and Shane from UnitedHealth Group / Fusion Group, and also Paul from Accenture. Absolutely lively and informative dialogue. I also want to encourage the folks that are listening in to visit our website, altitudeinc.com. We have very valuable resources talking along these topics in the insights area, and all the hangouts are available there too that we've had. And additionally, as I mentioned, the work area has some case studies you might find interesting, like Firefly, Little Sparrows, to name a few. Okay, and with that, let's jump into the Ask the Questions. So for the panelists, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the questions that have the most votes. And then if you want to view them, you can click on the Ask the Questions, but I'll go ahead and ask them. And what I'd suggest we do is maybe just have one person jump in and answer each so we can get to more, unless you have something you're dying to say. All right. So for the first one, how is the data used in designing and then iterating? Again, I think we talked a little bit about that, but if there's anything you want to add.
I'll jump in just for a second here, and I'm going to anchor back to that agriculture example. Iteration is really important, and it's a hard thing to build and have patience for. So in farming, historical data has a big impact on how decision making is done in day-to-day operations. Understanding how things have gone in the past, what lessons you've learned in the past, is really important. And so when we talk about using data in iteration, historical data can be very, very important. And I know there's multiple schools of thought in big data and data science around gather everything and keep it, you never know what you need, versus only gather what you need and be very specific about the end game insights that you want to get after. I think there's a bit of both that you have to consider, and it's contextual. So if historical data, if iterating forward, if improving your product can benefit from that historical data and the compilation of it, I think you need to architect for that. But I think in an iteration from an iteration perspective, you absolutely have to be able to continue to learn from the previous lessons that you've had in the past.
Excellent. So the next one is from Andrew, who asked, does the UnitedHealth Group or AARP, so Theo or Shane, already import any data from IoT sensors If so, which ones, like Fitbit, Apple Watch, Nest, etc.?
I can take that for a moment. We do right now. It's exactly the devices that you've been thinking about. It's the Fitbits. The example is there's a program called Rally, which will help you when you're signing up for benefits see what's your based on your health and your social and mental factors, what's your age, and it's pulling in data from Fitbit, seeing how much you walk. I'm trying to think of the other sensors, scales that you can use as well that will connect to it. So we are pulling in that data, although I think that to date, it's been devices that already exist that we're pulling in, as opposed to a lot of the medical devices that are out there, such as insulin pumps and other devices.
Excellent. Theo, anything you want to add?
No, we don't. So
Okay. Oh, great. So let's go to Catherine's question. What's the best process for ensuring development of questions that lead to useful insights? In other words, how do you go about developing meaningful questions that lead to meaningful data?
I'll jump in again. First of all, this is a combination of consulting 101 and then the Holy Grail, right? So it's a bit of both ends of the spectrum. It's a really astute question. What I try to do with my clients and what I've found effective, I didn't invent this process, by the way. There's people way smarter than me that taught me this throughout my career. Look for the problem or look for the opportunity that you're trying to solve for first. So if we said that in farming, we want to increase yields, how do we increase yields? What are the things that impact it? Those are the type of questions that I want to start to develop. If you start with a problem statement for what you're trying to solve for, if you start with an opportunity statement and the value of that statement, why is it important? What am I going to get out of it? I think those will help drive the formation of some of the more important questions. The thing I would say is it's also difficult to manage once you start that, though, because it's a bit of a rabbit hole, right? It snowballs because the right questions lead to 100 other right questions, and those lead to 100 other right questions, and it becomes, Mickey trying to chop down the brooms in Fantasia, right? It's hard to stop that flow once you start it, which is both a good and a bad thing because you have to manage it.
Yep.
But, the key anchor point I would say is start with a problem statement. Start with what you're trying to solve for and define that as well as you can. The questions will come.
Good point. So Ram, let's take your question. Whenever data comes into discussion, security and privacy have been the biggest concerns for clients, even after providing many data points on security and privacy. How do we actually address such concerns as a community?
Well, I'll jump in, but I'd really like to hear Shane's comments on this as well, because I think healthcare data sensitivity is at a peak, right? We're talking about people's lives. I've seen two sides of the spectrum. I've seen organizations that have issues and have been impacted negatively by issues that take swift action and try to rectify them by putting controls in place. Controls, in other words, what are we doing with the data? What data are we allowed to gather? How do we protect that data? How do we manage ongoing systems that look at what that data is being used for? How do we identify threats out in the marketplace, right? Do we have people just literally going out there and doing research every day where their whole job is to identify, do we have a new threat? Do we have a new threat to our data, our privacy, our consumers' data, our consumers' privacy? And then the other side of it is, I think the governments of the world have started to get hip to this, right? In the US, we have, HIPAA regulations, which drive a lot of really big, expensive behaviors that organizations have to manage around protecting data and protecting health data. But Shane, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I hate to throw you under the bus, but I know you're dealing with this every day.
I know you said it well with HIPAA already has a lot of standards in place, and in some ways that makes it easy because if the data falls into that category, if it's already protected or if it's already secure, then the fact that there's a lot of it doesn't really matter. It's just how do we handle it. The problem for us comes in when there's data that we haven't, that doesn't fall neatly into place of what standard is it under. Yep. That's been the biggest problem for us. Is that right there. So using new data versus using more data of what we already have and what we already know how to protect.
So we'll just take a couple more questions and then we'll call it a wrap because we're, I think, about at the top of the hour. How is IoT and data and the data it collects impacting the quality of products and the consumer experience?
So I think I can jump into it. We talked about it, right? On how we need to make sure that there is a good feedback loop, right? There is a learning system in place so that it can understand from a consumer perspective, it can understand the actions that the consumer is trying to take, and then constantly feed it back and trying to figure out a better way to provide a better experience. So, for example, with Alexa now, right? A lot of people are using Alexa. That's the stats out there. Oh my God, everyone is using Alexa. But what exactly are they using it for, right? Are they using it just to ask a question, to see what the weather is like, to listen to music? Are there more things that Alexa and those virtual assistants can be able to provide, right? It's got to be more than just that, right? So for example, from a banking perspective, financial institutions are starting to integrate voice capability, but a lot of that is just oh well, I want to check my balance. Well, there has to be more that we can do, and it goes back to our original discussion about providing a more holistic experience, providing a more of a platform experience, looking at the entire consumer journey and not just a point functional solution. So all of that can be enabled if we're more thoughtful about the design and to be able to provide a learning experience.
Yeah, great answer. And so one last question here we'll take. How is the data enabling companies to better address customer needs that they may not know that they have? Which I think relates to what we're talking about, but if they don't know it, how do we help them know they need it and feel they need it?
Yeah, so I can use that example that I talked about before.
Sure.
With that company in Chicago that provides the lighting system, right? So lighting is a functional need if you look at it, but it goes beyond that. So by gathering the data on understanding how often that senior is getting out of bed, when he or she gets out of bed, that can be an indication to perhaps there are some an early UTI that the person is suffering from that he or she might not know. So that can be beneficial to both the health system and also as a consumer.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank Paul and Shane and Theo. This is a very, very informative dialogue with a lot of insights. So thank you very, very much. Go for the data, go for the insights. And with that, I'll thank everyone. Thank you for joining in, for the folks listening in. And I wish everyone a wonderful rest of their day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.